Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Question from Jim Miller. Questions 2 and 3. Dr. Price, do difficult passages like Luke 14:26 provide at least some evidence for a historical Jesus? I've mostly become a mythicist in recent years, but some of Jesus' harder sayings seem to suggest there might be a historical personality at square one. Otherwise, why create problematic axioms out of whole cloth? And then the next question is, will you be writing a book specifically and only on Gnosticism? I would love to see your full take on the subjects. Thank you very much, Jim Miller.
Well, as to the second one, I don't presently know enough about it. I'd really have to give a lot of study to all the Nag Hammadi texts, and because there's so much there to work through and to explain that doesn't even get explained in many books on Gnosticism by people that know loads more about it than I do. But I would love to do that, so ultimately, perhaps, but I got about at least 3 other books in line before that.
Should I read Luke 14:26 for everybody?
Yeah.
Just so they can kind of get a gist, and of course, this is in the canon, so this is going to be, this is in a gospel. So, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple.
Yeah, that one is not that difficult to, that wasn't so hard a saying, because I think the Zitzim Leben, the originary context, had to do with martyrdom, and there's a perfect illustration of it in the martyrdom of Perpetua and Felicitas, the first one being a kind of a noble family's adult daughter, and Felicitas being her maid. They're arrested for being Christians and about to be thrown into the arena to be devoured by the lions. And she's pregnant, Perpetua is, and her parents come to her cell and beg her not to go through with it. And she has the baby while she's in prison. And so they're bringing the baby to her and say, look, you've got this tiny baby. You're his mother. He needs you. We need you. Please say you're renouncing Christianity. It can't be important as important as your family. And she says, I see what you mean, but I can't apostatize from Jesus. I can't deny him. And so she does go ahead and get martyred. I just feel sure that's the point. It's absurd to imagine that Jesus is saying, it'd be better to hate and curse out your family. That'd be stupid. You'd have to be a lunatic to say that, and there's no reason to think that either somebody said it or that Christians revered it for meaning that, though Matthew did have a problem with it. He changed it to, if you love these people more than me, so he's trying to soften it, but it's not difficult to see the original point is being like, be like Perpetua. If it comes down to it, and you got to make a choice, it's got to be for Christ. You can blame the persecutors, but not the Christian martyr. And the hate, I think that means disdain and disregard. Is when Hebrews says that Christ went to the cross despising the shame. That means disdaining, and I don't care about that. This is what I have to do. And
isn't there a place that asks, a question, what should we do, or something? This is my mother. This is my something like he references right prior to, or while he's on the cross. Like he's on his mission. Like kind of in the vein of this.
Yeah, he nods to the beloved disciple and commits his mother to that disciple's care, and. So that's And apparently the beloved disciple is not supposed to be one of the brothers of Jesus in the gospel, because they are ridiculing Jesus. You want a big reputation, don't you? You can't skip this feast. And he says, look, there's no problem with you going to it, but there is for me. I'm not going to it. And then, of course, he does go. That's a real problem. But he won't entrust his mother to these jerks. He'd rather have her taken care of by the disciple. And Jesus has to part with his own family in Mark 3, right? Your mother and your brothers are outside wanting to speak with you, and apparently Jesus knows why, because Marcus said that they heard about how he was constantly mobbed and figured he's gone crazy. We've got to take him into our custody. And he says, oh, my mother and brothers are outside? Let me tell you who my mother and brothers are. It's these who hear the word of God and do it, not them! So he has done that. And that's the reason you got the Amos quote in there. I've come to set father against daughter-in-law and to make a man's enemies those of his own household. It's like it's like what's happening with politics today. If you say, well, I'm for Trump or against Trump or whatever, people are going to say, well, you're no longer a friend of mine. I've really paid for being a Republican, where I've lost jobs over it. I've lost friends over it. I can't believe they're that touchy. There are other friends of mine who say, look, that's just not, politics is not relevant to our friendship. I don't want to discuss it. And we don't, and we get along fine. Like John Loftus, he's like a Bernie Sanders supporting ultra-liberal. I personally think that is a crazy view, but I don't care what he thinks. If John believes that we're being visited by Martians, it doesn't matter to me. He doesn't think that, I'm pretty sure. But, if he believed the earth is flat, it's like in this scene in a Sherlock Holmes story. Somehow, Dr. Watson brings up that somebody thinks the earth is flat. What do you think about that, Holmes? And Holmes says, look, I don't know if it's flat or round. It doesn't matter to me. How can that be? Because I got one job to find the bad guys and bring them in. This has no relevance to me. It may be an interesting question, but I don't care one way or the other. Interesting. Well, there's a lot of stuff that you don't really have to have an opinion about. And so if you do, but somebody else has a different one, who the hell cares?
Well, you see that passage bringing you back to the whole Luke 14 thing. I've recently been watching a show by Leah Remini.
Oh, yeah.
And it's Scientology in the Aftermath. And I literally went on to Scientology, ex-Scientology Facebook groups. I'm going to be finding someone that I can interview that has escaped the cult. But one of the things they teach is, and this is weird, it kind of goes into the reincarnation theme of their teachings in Scientology, is that your mother is not, she can't have sole property of you, because your mother might be your daughter in the next life, and your daughter might be your brother and your father or something. You never know, so they detach the family essence. And therefore, when people leave, which is part of their, they have, I can't remember the term that there's used, but there's separation, right? And you have to cut them off completely. It doesn't matter. The church comes first, because now your mother and your father is the church. It's no longer the parent. And so a lot of families, when they separate, they have to sign away like, I will have no contact with these people at all. And when you watch the show, you can't help but break a few tears here and there when you see the turmoil of something like that. A simple passage like this can be taken by a fundamentalist all the way and destroy lives, which I know we are, we obviously are looking at this thing from an angle that we're not trying to be persecutors of the text, but it's easy to see how it can be abused and misused and stuff. And in this situation, I kind of wonder if there is this strange, who cares what your earthly family is? I wonder if there's something there.
That's the way it is with all new sectarian movements, like with the Moonies. Oh boy, were they vilified. That was really a heresy hunt, in my opinion, more than anything else. I've been very impressed with the many unificationists I've met and taught, and I realize how they just get bad-mouthed. But one thing that was sort of true was that they discouraged contact with your natural family. And when people called them off, they said, well, look, the nuns in the convent, they have the same policy. The idea is to get you used to this new world you've chosen. We don't kidnap anybody and force them to join what the convent does. But once you're in there, you want to have both feet in that world. And they're right. I mean, I think it's kind of creepy, but I understand why all sectarian groups do that. You've entered a different world and you've got to be acclimated to it. And you don't want your family constantly saying, come back home. If you've committed, I mean, now you're asking a very different thing of your newly converted person, and you got to let them go their own way. And especially since the Moonies and other groups like that have found that there's over a 90% turnover rate. They don't keep people prisoner. People explore it for a while, and by far most of them eventually leave it. And they know that's going to happen. I mean, but it is distasteful in a way. But it's not quite as perverse as it sounds. They have a good sense of social psychology. It's like when you're in a fundamentalist church and they say, no, you can't be unequally yoked together. Don't even date, much less marry somebody who's not in the faith. Is that bigotry? No. They know if you're not sharing the most important thing in your life, you got trouble being together. And with Jews especially, it's not bigotry for them to oppose interfaith marriage because they know what'll happen. As the ancients knew, that's going to be the end of the Jewish community. They're such a small minority anyway. And if you just dilute the whole thing, and we're going to have, what do they call it? Chrismica, Christmas and Hanukkah together. That's benign, but that's not going to keep Judaism alive. I don't want Judaism to become an extinct religion. And so it sounds, even what's his name, the Farrakhan, he was trying to explain their position on that, and he said, but if love insists, what can you do? Even this guy had a compassionate flexibility, as much of a bastard as he is otherwise. So that's kind of the Jewish view. They'd rather you didn't for the sake of a larger group, but of course it's up to you.
Join our Patreon.
We are Mythvision.